Discover the incredible journey of a retired police dog. What his collar revealed will shock you. Jack Thompson sat in his cluttered living room, staring at the empty floor space where Rex used to sit, eyes trained on the door, waiting for his partner to return home. His weathered hands trembled as he picked up the worn police collar, feeling its weight against his palm, a relic of the life they shared on the streets. A sudden rush of memories flooded his mind. The laughter, the adoration, the trust. But now, the silence felt unbearable, a chasm where Rex once filled his world with purpose. With a heavy heart and a desperate need to feel connected, Jack carefully explored the collar, his fingers brushing against its fabric. To his astonishment, he discovered a hidden compartment. The leather creaked open, revealing a collection of letters addressed to Rex, penned by the townsfolk whose lives had been touched by the courageous dog. Each letter recounted heartfelt stories of rescues, companionship, and solace, igniting rays of light in his foggy existence. But then he noticed one letter, its edges dulled by time and secrecy, lingering like a shadow in his memory. As he read its ink-stained words, his stomach dropped, an anonymous note hinting at corruption within the police department he had devoted his life to. Confusion churned like a storm inside him. The pride he had always felt for his colleagues twisted into something dark and bitter. Betrayal seeped into his heart, tainting the loyalty he wore like a badge of honor and leaving him adrift in a sea of mistrust. What kind of man was he, having served alongside people who may have been involved in deceit? The pillar of ethics that defined his career felt as fragile as glass, and he found himself paralyzed by doubt. Who was he protecting? Was he just part of a rigged game, a pawn in a system that failed to serve the community? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With steely determination, Jack transitioned from grief to an unexpected motivation. The very essence of justice sparked anew inside him. He began making inquiries, visiting coffee shops where patrons whispered stories behind steaming mugs. Hushed tones and wary glances followed him, but Jack felt the walls closing in around him. The fear that charged the air was palpable. Former partners brushed off his questions with deflections and sidelong glances, insisting he let sleeping dogs lie. Each conversation heightened the distress within him, as unanswered questions clung like shadows in his mind. Was he willing to risk his relationships for uncertain truths? The whispering grew louder as he uncovered more secrets, leading him to dark corners he once thought safe. Just as he began to piece together fragments of a story filled with bribery and betrayal, a chilling note appeared on his doorstep, a clear warning to cease his inquiries. The sight of it ignited an icy wave of dread. Who would go to such lengths to protect their lies? His heart raced, and a gnawing fear crept into his thoughts. Jack stood at a precipice, each breath strained with desperation as he questioned what he truly valued. Loyalty, silence, or the unwavering quest for truth, even if the price of honesty could cost him everything. The necessity for a choice loomed large, and Jack found himself stepping deeper into a danger he had never anticipated. Clutching Rex's legacy tightly in his hands as he faced uncertain storms ahead, Jack's resolve solidified like steel. He remembered the stories penned by the townsfolk, half-expressed gratitude balanced with the weight of their struggles. Inspired by Rex's legacy, he realized the community deserved better. A flicker of determination ignited his weary heart. He would not stand idle. The shadow of distrust could no longer govern him. With each passing day, Jack meticulously mapped out his strategy. His first move was to connect with Sophia, the journalist known for her relentless pursuit of truth. She had a reputation for exposing corruption, and that's exactly what Jack needed. As he sat in his car outside the local diner, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. No longer could he dismiss the notes that had warned him to stop. If the department's righteousness was a sham, it was time to shine a light on it. Upon entering the diner, Jack spotted Sophia at a back booth, her fingers flying over her laptop. He took a steadying breath, ordering a coffee before approaching her table. She glanced up, her expression shifting from surprise to curiosity as he introduced himself. "I think we can help each other," he began, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts crashing over him. Sophia listened intently, her sharp gaze encouraging him to share more. As Jack recounted his discoveries, he meticulously skipped over the fear. Instead, he focused on the logic of his findings. The betrayal stung, but he transformed that pain into a narrative. Jack described the anonymous note, the hushed conversations, and the distrust among former colleagues. Each revelation felt cathartic, as if he was shedding layers of secrecy that had clung to him for too long. "We're entering dangerous territory," she finally said, leaning closer. "Are you prepared for the consequences?" Her question dripped with concern, a reflection of his own fears. Jack nodded. "More than ever. I can't keep looking away." A spark flickered in Sophia's eyes. "Then let's dig deeper," she said with a determination that mirrored his own. They made a plan to meet regularly, exchanging findings and strategizing their approach. Together, they would stitch together the truth buried beneath layers of deceit. Over the following weeks, Jack became more adept in his new role, not just as a former officer, but as a whistleblower. He honed his investigative skills with each meeting, learning how to collect information, interview sources, and maintain a balance between caution and audacity. His unease with confronting former colleagues presented challenges, but Jack pushed past it. The fear of betrayal transformed into a driving force, propelling him to seek justice, not only for himself, but for all those who had trusted the badge. As he dove into the underbelly of the department, he began to uncover threads connecting a rising number of unsolved cases to high-ranking officers. The more he discovered, the more he realized he was entangled in a web far bigger than he had anticipated. However, paranoia shadowed every step. Each fleeting glance felt suspect, and conversations turned into potential traps. Jack felt the weight of his choices threatening to engulf him, and as he prepared for their next meeting, he spotted another warning slip left on his windshield. The message was clear: "Stay away from Sophia." At that moment, Jack's resolve hardened. The fear of losing everything he had fought for burst forth into determination. With dark clouds closing in, he understood the stakes had risen. He would need to confront not just the corruption, but also the forces conspiring against him and his new ally. It was time to decide whether he would stand on the edge of the abyss or leap into it, fully aware of the consequences. What would he sacrifice on this perilous path to truth? As he read the note, he knew the moment had come to face not only the shadows of his past, but the very people he once considered friends. The journey ahead promised peril, but with Rex's spirit guiding him, he was prepared to embrace the unknown. How far could he go before discovering just how deep the corruption ran? Jack stood frozen, the note clenched in his fist as adrenaline surged through his veins. The warning was more than a threat. It was a challenge to his instincts. The world he had known, once a sanctuary of loyalty and justice, felt increasingly alien. He had crossed an invisible divide, a transition from officer to whistleblower, from silence to vulnerability. Determined not to let fear dictate his actions, he took a moment to breathe and stepped back into his car. He needed a plan, a way to sift through the chaos without losing himself or Sophia in the process. What became clear was that he couldn't ignore the warning. For now, he decided to keep their meetings discreet. A dimly lit cafe, perhaps, or even the vacant lot behind the old warehouse. As days turned into nights, Jack immersed himself in research. He transformed his home office into a command center, sprawling maps of connections and timelines cluttering the walls. Each thread he uncovered led deeper into the ranks of the department, revealing unsolved cases tangled in corruption. The names of officers he had once trusted morphed into suspects before his eyes. It felt surreal, nearly fantastical, yet he clung to every fact, slowly piecing together the tapestry of deceit. In the afternoons, as a disguise of normalcy, Jack resumed jogging in the park. The routine calmed him, allowing the anxiety to settle. Each time he ran past the police station, however, a knot tightened in his stomach. He understood the stakes. There were eyes everywhere, watching, scrutinizing. It forced him to confront the guilt of his previous complacency. How could he have turned a blind eye to the very issues he now sought to expose? The mental toll of his choices weighed heavily upon him. One evening, he spilled his thoughts to Sophia over a spirited conversation about the investigation. Leaning over a table cluttered with coffee cups and scribbled notes, he admitted, "I sometimes wonder if I'm fighting a battle I cannot win. What if this ends badly?" Sophia's gaze was steady. "But what if you're right, Jack? What if exposing this corruption can save lives? You're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for those who can't." Her words were both a challenge and a reminder of his resolve. Reinvigorated, Jack plunged back into the fray with newfound energy. He began drafting letters to local news outlets, outlining his concerns before ultimately deciding that summarizing everything into one cohesive piece was necessary. The closer he got to a compelling narrative, the more adrenaline coursed through him. Yet, with every step forward, the shadow of risk loomed ever larger. Jack received ominous calls, a prankster's laughter blaring on the other end, followed by heavy breathing that sent chills down his spine. He had been naive to think he could dismantle a fortress of deceit without retaliation. One late evening, he received a text message from Sophia. "We need to meet. Urgent." Something in the brevity struck him cold. Was she in danger? He pushed aside the unease gnawing at him and responded, agreeing to meet at the abandoned warehouse as planned. As he made his way there, doubts clouded his mind. Had he set them both on a collision course with disaster? What if the threats were closer to him than he realized? The beat of his heart echoed in the darkness as he approached the meeting spot, an encounter that felt like the calm before a storm. Jack reached the door, took a deep breath to steady himself, and entered. Would the answers he sought lead to salvation or despair? The moment of truth awaited him, and he could no longer deny that the time had come to finally confront the forces at play. What awaited him inside could alter the trajectory of everything he had worked for. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust, and the lingering scent of machinery long neglected. Jack's instincts screamed at him to retreat, yet curiosity anchored him in place. He scanned his surroundings, the dim light casting long shadows that danced eerily across the concrete walls. His heart raced, not just from fear, but from the daunting task ahead. Across the room, Sophia emerged from the darkness. Her face was pale, concern etched deep into her features. Jack quickly closed the distance, her presence momentarily easing the turmoil within him. "Jack, she began hesitantly, then paused, searching for the right words. "I've heard things that might put us both in danger." "Like what?" His voice held an edge of urgency. Every instant counted. He could already feel the walls closing in. "I found out who's been calling you," she replied, her eyes wide. "It's someone from the department. They suspect you're digging deeper." His stomach sank at the realization. The threats were not mere coincidences. They had eyes on him. He couldn't help but feel exposed, a target in a game he didn't want to play. "What should we do?" Sophia leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to tread carefully. I believe there's a mole sending information to someone high up. We can't trust anyone." Jack nodded, the weight of her revelation resonating deeply. The enormity of their situation hung heavily in the air between them. "If that's true, we need proof. Something concrete to expose them." She pulled out a small USB drive from her jacket pocket. "I managed to get this from one of the officers who had doubts. It's encrypted. But if we can crack it, it might give us the leverage we need." Impressed but wary, Jack took the drive, contemplating the consequences. "You risked a lot for this," he said, gratitude mingling with concern. "If they discover you, I'll take my chances if it means holding them accountable," she interrupted, steel in her voice. "But what about you? If they find out you're involved, It could end your career, or worse. His mind raced. He could no longer consider himself a mere whistleblower. With every piece of information he accumulated, he became embroiled deeply in a treacherous game. I can't stop now. I've come too far. Sophia's brow furrowed, frustration sparking in her eyes. Jack, you must think this through. What about your family? What about us? I know what's at stake, he responded sharply, although a part of him cringed at the thought of putting Sophia at risk. But this isn't just about me anymore. It's about justice. They stood in silence for a moment, the tension between them palpable, charged with conflicting emotions. Jack needed to focus. He had to think strategically, to outmaneuver those who threatened him. The idea of personal sacrifice loomed larger than ever. Let's head back to my place, Jack finally said, his voice steadier now. I have equipment there that might help us decrypt the drive. As they moved toward the exit, Jack's resolve solidified. Each step away from that warehouse reminded him of the fine line he walked between justice and danger, a line that might shatter at any moment. As the night deepened around them, Jack felt the shadows of his past rise. He couldn't shake the apprehension that they were being watched, that bigger forces were at play. The knowledge that their every move could be monitored ignited an unyielding fire within him. Jack, are you ready for this? Sophia asked, cutting through the silence. The question hung in the air, heavy with importance. He paused, taking a moment to analyze his choices. Could he shoulder the weight of what was to come? What if this commitment led to a reckoning far beyond his expectations? But what he didn't know about himself might just be the key. Jack nodded firmly, determination surging through him. Ready as I'll ever be. As they slipped into the shadows, a figure lurked in the distance, the barest hint of a grin playing on its lips, a prelude to inevitable conflict. Jack's pulse quickened at the thought. The time had come to confront the darkness head-on. The clatter of footsteps echoed off the warehouse walls, offering an unsettling reminder of their precarious situation. As Jack and Sophia stepped into the night, the weight of the USB drive felt heavier in his pocket. He wondered about the information it contained, how many lives it held at the mercy of his decisions. Jack's perception sharpened. Every shadow seemed to pulse with life, every rustle of leaves an impending threat. Back at his apartment, he had all the tools necessary to decrypt the data, but it was the risk that gnawed at him. Could he shake this unease? He recalled Sophia's face, steadfast yet terrified. Her bravery both inspired and terrified him, and he found himself wrestling with the potential consequences. They reached his apartment, the familiar surroundings feeling transformed in light of recent revelations. The living room, once a sanctuary, now resembled a battlefield strewn with old case files and blueprints. Checking the windows and doors, Jack ensured they were sealed tight before breaking the silence that cloaked them. Sophia, if these leads connect to higher-ups, we need to behave strategically, he stated, feeling the intensity of his situation increase with each word. Information is our weapon now. We must use it wisely. Sophia nodded, her expression darkening. We also need to be fluid. If they suspect us, we can't rely solely on that drive. We have to make backup plans. Information may change or be taken from us at any time. He appreciated the pragmatism in her voice. It was a reminder that they were engaged in a high-stakes chess game. For a moment, a flicker of fear ignited in him. What if they couldn't achieve justice? What if all this effort led to ruin instead? Do you think we'll be able to crack it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia hesitated, her forehead furrowing in concentration. If we approach it methodically, we should manage. We could even use portioned analysis, breaking it down piece by piece, but it's certainly not guaranteed. Jack felt a wave of determination surge through him. We can't afford mistakes. I'll tackle the technical part. You focus on strategizing our next move. Keep watch for any sign of them. As Jack settled in front of his computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard, he felt an untapped reservoir of skill bubble up within him. The hours he had spent chasing leads, parsing through logs, and decoding patterns started to materialize. Maybe he was more than a mere cog in the department's machinations. Perhaps he could genuinely affect change. He launched into the decryption process, feeling the rhythm of his thoughts harmonize with the frantic beats of the clock. Binary code cascaded across the screen, but his mind remained undistracted. Here, in this singular moment, Jack discovered clarity amid chaos. Each line of code unfurled secrets waiting to be unveiled. He felt empowered, unveiling hidden steps toward justice that lingered just out of reach. Yet the sense of pride was punctured by a sudden noise outside, an unexpected crunch of gravel beneath heavy steps, a reminder of the danger they were flirting with. Heart racing, Jack glanced sideways at Sophia, who was now listening intently for any unusual activity. "Keep your eyes peeled," he instructed. "We're not alone." Just then, the unmistakable feeling of being watched washed over him again. It was a sensation he had learned to recognize well, often just moments before a crucial confrontation. Jack's resolve hardened. He was ready to step into the unknown, to embrace the strange new parts of himself that had begun to emerge. Perhaps it was the uncertainty of danger that thrust these hidden capabilities into the light. As the decryption process began, time stretched, each second tinged with unresolved tension. Fragments of data floated before him, yet Jack could sense the greater battle approaching. A merging of fate and consequence that lay ahead. Then abruptly, the power flickered. The computer screen dimmed, casting the room into uncertainty. Jack and Sophia exchanged alarmed glances, the return of that dread feeling surging anew. "Get ready," he whispered. "I think it's time to face whatever comes next." A shadow moved audibly across the window, and a familiar, sinister smile crept into his thoughts as reality warped around him. Like the tipping of a scale, whatever was about to unfold would redefine everything he thought he knew about himself. Jack held his breath, his heart pounding in rhythm with the flickering light. A looming presence outside the window seemed to amplify the stakes of their mission. The droning silence in the apartment morphed into an oppressive weight, pressing down on him. "Stay focused," he told himself as he returned to the screen, resolute in his purpose. Each line of code now carried not just data, but whispers of lives entwined in secrets he was determined to expose. What had once felt like mere work was fast transforming into a personal quest for truth, the thrill of investigating a puzzle awakening a zeal he had long buried under the routine of his professional life. Yet self-doubt crept in, casting shadows over his confidence. What if he failed? What if the drive was more trap than treasure? He felt his fingers hover without action for a moment. But as the beat of his pulse reminded him of the stakes, he shook off the hesitation. This was not merely about the drive, but about standing against corruption, reclaiming a sense of agency that had slipped through society's cracks. He initiated a series of commands, focusing his mind on decrypting the first layer of data. Lines of binary flashed across the screen, blurring together into a sea of ones and zeros. It was mesmerizing. "Yes, come on," he murmured, his fingers dancing over the keys. Then it happened, an unexpected surge as the screen blinked. Snippets of decrypted data flashed before his eyes. Names, dates, transactions, revealing glimpses of a sprawling network of corruption that infiltrated the very heart of the legal system. "Jack!" Sophia's urgent whisper broke through his absorption. "Listen." He paused, straining to catch any sounds beyond the apartment's walls. The crunch of footsteps on gravel had returned, closer this time. Tension prickled at the back of his neck. "We can't risk this getting exposed," he said, voice low but charged with intensity. "Keep an eye on the door." Just as he turned back to the screen, a cascade of new data poured forth, encrypted files connected to officials well above them. Jack's pulse quickened. The pieces were coming together, and he felt the undeniable rush of empowerment. He was not simply a cog anymore. He was the orchestrator of change. "Jack!" Sophia hissed again. "I see something." A shadow loomed at the edge of the window, dark and imposing. Jack's heart raced, adrenaline flooding his system. He had to act, to protect both their findings and themselves. Was this the moment he would truly become the hero he had always fantasized about, or would he be the one who faltered? "Let's initiate the next phase," he instructed, feverishly typing. "We need to erase our footprints before—" Before he could finish, the lights completely went out. Darkness enveloped them, leaving only the faint glow of the monitor casting an eerie light across the walls. "Stay low," Jack whispered urgently, adrenaline sharpening his senses. A moment of deafening silence ensued, then came the sound that reverberated through him. Glass shattering. Instinct kicked in. He dove for the flashlight on his desk. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating Sophia's anxious face. "What do we do now?" She nearly gasped, eyes wide with fear. "We prepare for a fight, or we flee. Our choice just got more complex," he replied, steeling himself for the unknown. He felt a sudden surge of clarity, the intersection of fear and resolve crystallizing into one lucid thought. He was ready to confront whatever was next. As they moved to the door, Jack realized that the moment of truth was at hand. They were approaching a reckoning that would not only define their mission, but fundamentally alter the fabric of his existence and the man he had feared he could never become. Then, in an instant, a voice sliced through the darkness. "We know you're in there, Jack, and we're not leaving until you hand over that drive." The chill of recognition coursed through him, the familiar tone igniting a fierce determination. This wasn't merely a confrontation. It was personal. Jack's heart thundered in his chest, amplifying each syllable of that menacing voice. Recognition flashed through him like a lightning strike. Mark Reynolds, a prominent figure in the very corruption Jack sought to expose. This wasn't just a matter of shifting shadows anymore. This was a direct challenge to everything Jack had fought to uncover. "Think, Jack," he whispered to himself, adrenaline heightening his awareness. The details of their surroundings suddenly felt sharper, the grave nuances of each creak in the floorboards, the chill in the air, the insistent hum of the computer urging him onward. He could not afford to panic. There was either a way out or a way to stand his ground, and he needed to decide quickly. "I'll distract them," he said, low and firm. "You need to find a place to hide and protect that drive." Sophia's face twisted in disbelief. "Are you crazy? We can't just give it to them." Holding her gaze, he could see the conflict in her eyes. The drive held not only their findings, but also a deep connection to their shared ambition. "If they get it first, everything we've done means nothing. Just trust me," he urged, his resolve softening for just a moment, urging her to believe in his plan. He had never been a man who welcomed confrontation. His life had been a series of calculated decisions, a dance on the edge of caution. But here, at this precipice, he felt the adrenaline surge give way to clarity. What if this was his moment to define himself, not just as a technician in a bubble of pixels and codes, but as a guardian of integrity? "Fine," she relented, eyes darting nervously as she moved toward the adjoining room. Jack watched her disappear into the shadows, every instinct urging him to reconsider. But the voice outside was growing impatient, and he knew he had to act. With measured breaths, Jack stepped toward the door, his mind racing through potential strategies. He knew Reynolds would want to intimidate, to assert dominance, so Jack's response needed to counter that. He adjusted his posture to exude confidence, gripping the edges of the door frame tightly as he opened it slightly, a sliver of light breaking through into the oppressive darkness. "What do you want, Reynolds?" he called out, voice steadier than he felt. There was a moment of silence, then a scoff. "You know what I want, Jack. Hand over the drive, and we can forget this ever happened." His pulse quickened. The weight of the moment settled in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. Jack tempered his fear with defensive contempt. "What makes you think I'd ever trust a word you say?" The door creaked as Reynolds leaned closer, the silhouette cast in the dim light revealing a smirk painted across his features. "Because, Jack, we both know how this story ends. You're outmatched, but give it to me, and I'll let you walk away." Outmatched? The word sank into Jack's psyche, igniting a fire within him. He might not have been a physical threat, but he had invaluable knowledge, instincts forged over years of technology work. In a single moment, he understood that he held a card of his own, a wealth of information capable of turning the tides. The drive contained his resurgence, the mechanics of the corruption interlacing through his mind. It didn't matter that he was standing against a powerful adversary. For the first time, he wasn't just terrified, he was defiant. "I'm not giving it to you, Reynolds. You're wrong about what I'm prepared to sacrifice," he declared, allowing his voice to resound with newfound determination. Before he could evaluate the impact of his own words, the sound of footsteps blasted through the tension. More voices joined Reynolds, thickening the tension with urgency. His own choice now lay heavy in the air, to stand tall or retreat into hiding. With a flick of his wrist, he hesitated, weighing the risks of each potential outcome. As uncertainty spiraled in his mind, he realized it was time to reclaim not only his drive, but the very spirit of who he had allowed himself to become. Then, just beyond the door, the harsh sound of metal clinking against metal startled him. "Last chance, Jack. Don't make this harder for yourself." The confrontational tone echoed, reverberating like a challenge threading through Jack's core. He could feel the urgency surging within him, compelling him to make the choice that would forge his destiny. The moment had arrived for Jack to embrace the depths of his own potential, setting him on a collision course with a past he longed to escape but could no longer ignore. "Time to show them who I am," he whispered, steeling himself for whatever lay beyond. As the door's handle twisted, stretching his uncertainty to its limit, Jack braced for the impact of the truth, knowing it was now or never. The door creaked open, and Jack stepped out into the dim hallway, determination coursing through him like a lifeblood that ignited every nerve ending. He bathed in the stark realization that within him lay depths he'd barely touched. This wasn't merely a confrontation regarding a drive. This was about reclaiming his identity and confronting a world that had long threatened to swallow him whole. Reynolds stood not 5 feet away, flanked by 2 enforcers who added a layer of menace to the shadows they cast. Jack could feel the stares, not just of their eyes, but also the weight of their expectations. They were nothing like him, power-hungry and devoid of any shred of integrity. But beneath their intimidation was a crucial understanding. Jack could not be broken by quick intimidation tactics. Instead, his mind sparked alive, formulating a strategy even in the face of danger. "Is this what it's come to, Mark? Hiding behind muscle?" Jack asked, his voice a mix of disdain and defiance. He clenched his fists, burying the fear that threatened to rear its head. It felt liberating to speak the truth so openly. Reynolds's smirk widened, but something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps uncertainty. "You're bluffing, Jack. You can't expect to survive this." Jack squared his shoulders, recalling endless nights spent dissecting failures and successes in algorithms rather than engaging with real life. Those days had shaped his ability to think on his feet. Now, that same reasoning powered his bravado. "No, actually, I'm not bluffing. It's you who's making a miscalculation." With calculated precision, Jack pivoted. The plan was risky, but so was staying rooted in place. He moved sideways down the hall, making small adjustments to angle toward the exit that loomed at the end. His mind raced through contingencies. Could Sophia make it out safely? What about the drive? "Stop him!" Reynolds bellowed as the thud of footsteps echoed behind Jack. The voices rose like a swarm of angry bees, propelling him forward, each step fueled by the adrenaline of survival mixed with the clarity of purpose that had been dormant within. The door to the stairwell stood ajar, its hinges barely whispering secrecy. Jack dashed inside and closed it tightly behind him, pressing his back against the cool metal. Heart pounding, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It was a moment of stillness that felt stolen, a precious second where he could gather his next move. His reflexes took over, and he grabbed his phone, fingers trembling as he fought to keep his thoughts organized. Information. That was his true weapon. He accessed the encrypted files, feeling a sense of ownership as he scrolled through the data. This could expose the very foundation of Reynolds's empire, a gift wrapped in digital insight, but doubt twisted in his gut. Was this about more than revenge on Reynolds? Was it time to reconstruct the narrative that had long defined him as an outsider in this world of shadows? The drive held more than just findings. It represented a potential future, a means to channel his fear into something constructive, something greater than himself. Voices from above punctured the air, and Jack winced. They were relentless and closing in fast. He could no longer delay. But as his finger hovered over the send button to distribute their findings, a new thought struck him. This wasn't just a mission to throw a wrench in Reynolds's plans. Could he, Jack, use this moment as a launch pad for something more significant for himself and Sophia? With a newfound resolve, he sent the data, hoping it would reach the right people. The game wasn't over. It had just begun, and he was no longer merely a pawn. He was a player. Now it was time to move. He pushed open the door to the stairwell, emerging into the neon-lit chaos of the night, where danger mingled with opportunity ahead of him. As Jack stole into the darkness, he felt the weight of the world shift. His path lay before him, laden with chances he had never anticipated. And as he merged into the alleys of the city, one question lingered. Was he prepared to face the fallout of his choices, to become the very man he had always dreamed of being? As Jack navigated the claustrophobic alleyways, the cacophony of the city transformed into a backdrop for his thoughts. Each step resonated with the pulse of his heartbeat, driving home the realization that he had crossed a threshold, a line drawn between fear and resolve. There was no turning back now. The encrypted files sat heavy in Jack's mind. He no longer viewed them as mere digital footprints, but as blueprints for his reassembly. He felt a spark of agency he had long thought vanished, an ember glowing beneath layers of self-doubt. With the drive sent into the ether, Jack grasped that he wasn't just defending against Reynolds. He was asserting his existence in a narrative he wished to rewrite. A corner turned, and he paused to catch his breath, leaning against a brick wall that had soaked up the city's grime and dreams alike. Faced with a choice, hide or confront, the urge to run receded. He could use this moment, this newfound tenacity, to mount an offense rather than retreat into the shadows. Yet the night air was thick with uncertainty. Could he truly trust that those whom he had dispatched the files to would act in his favor? The world had always seemed unforgiving, and allies had often turned to enemies under the guise of ambition. Jack had always played the long game, calculating risks and measuring outcomes, yet here he was, stepping into unknown territory, heart racing, breaths quickening. An echo of laughter from a group of late-night revelers skipped through the air, stirring memories of simpler times. Before the weight of the world pressed upon him, before he had felt like a spectator in his own life, Jack once believed in the beauty of uninhibited joy. Could he reclaim that innocence now, or was it buried beneath the rubble of a life dictated by survival and retaliation? Shaking off the remnants of nostalgia, Jack prompted himself forward, each choice cementing his identity. He found himself retrieving his phone again, not to check for alerts, but to assess what came next. The city was his chessboard, and each hand that moved the pieces could influence the game's outcome wildly. He located an anonymous chat platform buried among his apps. An old friend, a safety net he had used during his days of research and digital espionage. Jack to Agent X. Situation escalated. Previous data sent. What's next? He typed, his thumb hovering over the send button, weighing the implications of trusting others as a crook reveals secrets. The response was almost instantaneous. Meet at the usual spot. We've got your back. The relief that washed over him was almost visceral, yet it did little to mask the turmoil of accompanying trepidation. Meeting them meant stepping directly into the line of fire, into a potential ambush, but staying put left him vulnerable. Jack knew too well the risks of inaction. He could already hear Reynolds's mocking taunts echoing in his mind. Determined, he thumbed the location into his map. A hidden cafe that had seen too many clandestine meetings was a scant 10-minute walk away. He recalled Sophia's worried gaze, how her uncertainty and excitement danced behind her eyes, entangling with his own fears. They had navigated life in the margins, and now it seemed they might finally carve out a space where they could stake their claims openly. As he approached the cafe, shadows playing tricks with his mind, what became apparent was that this meeting was not just about newfound alliances. It was about defining who he would become when the chips finally fell. Jack stepped inside the dimly lit establishment, adrenaline sharp as he prepared to engage in a high-stakes conversation that could ripple through the seams of his life. Trust was his newest currency, and he hoped it would pay off. But as he scanned the room, a familiar face emerged unexpectedly from the shadows, one he thought he would never see again. The tension in his chest tightened. Was this a blessing or a betrayal? The moment teetered on the edge of something monumental, and as he locked eyes with the figure across the room, Jack knew the true confrontation was about to begin. Would he welcome the past, or fight it? This choice would shape the rest of his journey, and the legacy he aimed to reclaim. Jack stood at the threshold of the cafe, emotions colliding within him. Anticipation, fear, hope. The day had arrived that would define his new path, and as he entered the dimly lit establishment, the familiar scent of coffee wafted through the air, mingling with an undercurrent of uncertainty. Trust was both a weapon and a risk, and he needed to stay sharp. His heart raced when he spotted Sophia across the room. Their eyes locked for an electrifying moment. Sophia's presence provided a sense of solace amid the chaos swirling around them. It was surreal how far they had come together, bending the confines of their former lives into a pursuit for truth. She beckoned him over, her face a mixture of concern and encouragement. "Jack," she whispered as he approached, "I'm glad you're here. I spoke with Agent X." "Good," he replied, scanning the cafe's dimly lit corners for potential threats. "Do we have some allies who can help?" Sophia nodded, her determination solid. "Yes, but they need proof before making their move. This," she gestured to the USB drive tucked safely in her pocket, "is crucial. It has the potential to blow the lid off Reynolds' operation, but we need to be methodical." In the midst of their conversation, the door swung open, and a figure emerged. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was his former partner, Mark Reynolds, his face laden with the smug confidence of someone who believed he had won. The cafe's atmosphere shifted, tension coiling around them like a predator stalking its prey. Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of betrayal creep back into his consciousness. "Jack," Reynolds called out, a knowing grin stretching across his face. "I see you finally made some friends in low places. Or are you still chasing shadows?" In that moment, Jack realized that he had already stepped into an opportunity for confrontation he had once feared. His voice lifted, charged with resolve. "You don't intimidate me anymore, Reynolds. This time you're on borrowed time." Reynolds' laughter echoed, derisive yet uncertain, a reflection of his crumbling confidence. Behind him, the cafe's patrons flickered anxious glances, sensing the tension. Jack felt a sense of control redefining his existence. It was now about confronting not just Reynolds, but the remnants of his own past, the weight of insecurity falling away. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Reynolds said, stepping closer, his veneer cracking. "But you can only run so far before the spotlight finds you again." "I'm done running," Jack declared, voice steady, conviction radiating from him. "What's hidden in the shadows will see the light. You may have had power, but I have the truth, and that's something you'll never possess." With that, he turned back toward Sophia, who met his gaze with fiery understanding. "Let's get out of here," Jack prompted, no longer waiting for the threat of confrontation to escalate. They had fought too hard to let fear dictate their lives any longer. They slipped out of the cafe together, Jack gripping the door's handle as if it were the catalyst for his transformation. Outside, the cool night air fortified him. It felt like a rebirth. He turned to Sophia, who was emanating the kind of strength he had only just discovered in himself. "It's time for us to make our move," he stated. "We can't just expose Reynolds. We need to reshape how justice is delivered in this town." Together, they dispatched the findings they had gathered to trusted news outlets, combined with evidence to ensure the truth wouldn't be buried again. They embraced the challenge ahead with clear intention, not merely seeking retribution, but striving to forge a new pathway for others who believed themselves powerless. Days flew by, anticipation bubbling as they received confirmation that the news was gaining traction. Jack felt a steady pulse of growth within him, the burgeoning confidence reflected in the approval of those they enlisted. Conversations shifted in whispers around town, from fear to cautious hope, emboldened by Jack's determination to unshackle his community. Finally, the day arrived when an investigation was announced, led by a new chief determined to rebrand the police department with integrity. Jack stood at the forefront, alongside Sophia, ready to address the town that had once felt so distant. In a packed community center, Jack faced the crowd. The weight of the world lifted as he recognized their trust hanging heavily in the air. He shared his story of transformation. Not just his, but that of his beloved partner Rex, whose legacy now intertwined with every word spoken. "I used to be afraid," he articulated confidently, his voice echoing through the hall. "Afraid of what I might lose, of what I would have to face. But I learned that sometimes we must step into the fire for the people around us to find something greater." The townspeople listened intently, absorbing the change blooming in front of them. The ethical complexities that had threatened to consume him transformed into a drive toward fairness, reminding him of the very values he had once sworn to uphold. Finally, Jack stepped down, filled with a profound sense of purpose and growth. The applause ringing throughout the hall confirmed that he was no longer just a bystander, but a respected conduit for change. No longer was he the man haunted by doubt, but a figure of truth, eager to forge a path forward. Reflecting on his journey, Jack embraced the authenticity of his existence, a personal achievement beyond any badge or title. This time, he thought, I will protect what matters most, not just for myself, but for every person who deserves justice. As they walked out, Jack intertwining fingers with Sophia, he realized that he had finally found home, not just in a sense of place, but in a life defined by integrity, action, and a commitment to justice. Now it's your turn to be part of a transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to experience more stories of triumph and resilience. Leave a like now to support the channel as we spread the important message of personal growth. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jack's incredible journey. Your thoughts matter. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this inspiring conclusion. Because every story of overcoming belongs in every heart.